Hi all, welcome to this, our first video looking at urban geography. Now, so I'm not going to spend too much time discussing some of the different contents and all that kind of stuff, but a very, very brief rundown. In the urban geography topic, we're going to be looking at two case studies, and these two case studies will be Glasgow and Mumbai, and within each of those case studies, we're going to be looking at the changes that have happened to these urban areas, specifically focusing on the changes that have occurred to housing and the changes that have occurred to transport. Now, in today's video, we're going to get stuck in and we're going to be looking at changes to housing in Glasgow. Now, this first wee section of the video, I just want to spend doing a little bit of background stuff. I did mention during one of our lessons recently that this stuff, it is background, it is still useful. It's not something that the SQA are going to ask you a specific question on, but it is useful to just help set the scene for the remainder of the stuff we're going to discuss in this topic. So first, looking at this, we've got three different models of how cities can grow, going from the very, very kind of straightforward concentric ring model, or the concentric ring model, sometimes also known as the Burgess model, where you have the city starts with its oldest part at the centre, which will then become the central business district, and it then grows from that point out in a very kind of regular fashion. There are some examples globally of cities that follow this, but it's really, really rare. The more useful for us sector model, or the Hoyt model, and this is where you have a city that grows along a linear feature. As our case study city is going to be Glasgow, and the linear feature that Glasgow grew along is the River Clyde, and it influences a large amount of the industry that the city developed. There's another model obviously on the screen. We've discussed this very, very briefly. The multiple nuclei model is something that's more common in more modern cities, but for what we're going to be looking at isn't something that we need to get too involved in at this stage. Now, when we talk about cities, we talk about different zones within a city, and these zones we can use to help tell us a lot about that city at different points. So in the middle of a city, we've got the CBD, or the Central Business District. This tends to be the more affluent area of a city, and it tends to have the area where you've got the most shops, and it's more or less entirely dedicated to land uses that are not residents, or not residential. People don't live here. The reason people don't live here is because the land is extremely expensive, because it's highly sought after. It's an area where most people work, thus you've got lots and lots of people in this area very, very frequently. And because of that, you've got a lot of shopping, because these shops and retail enterprises want to take advantage of the fact that you've got lots of people here very, very frequently. If you move out from the inner city, you then enter a region called the inner city. Or since you leave the CBD, you enter the inner city. The inner city is an area where traditionally most of the heavy industry or manufacturing in a city would have been practiced. And this is very much the case for Glasgow. And in Glasgow, the inner city runs outside of the CBD, and it runs along the River Clyde. So in here, you'll typically find you've got a lot of factories, and you'll have housing in Glasgow, tenement-style housing, that was originally built to house the people who were going to work in those factories. Building density in these areas is very, very high, as land is still at a premium. However, the cost of that land is very low, and the reason that the land value is so low is that it's extremely common for inner city areas to have fallen into decline in recent years. As you move on from this point, you enter various areas of primarily residential land. In this diagram, I've referred to old and new residential areas. Sometimes you would see old residential areas, and then the suburbs would replace new residential. But these terms are fairly interchangeable. Now, the idea here is that we are starting to see more and more modern houses being built as we reach the edge of the city as it currently stands. This will go along with building density falling, as you have more areas dedicated to gardens and to land that's set aside for families and what have you. But this does inflate the land value as these homes become more sought after. As we go outside of a city, we've got the green belt, or the urban fringe, and this is an area that is, it's outside of a city. It's set aside for, farming, forestry, and things like that, and it's designed to stop cities merging into one another. One of the things I say, building density is very, very low and land values are very, very low. And the reason land values stay extremely low in this area is there tends to be a lot of legislation put in place to protect the greenbelt, and that legislation tends to also stop building. And because it stops building, it suppresses land values. Now, moving into Glasgow, and we're going to talk a little bit again about setting the scene for Glasgow as a city. Now, and I apologise, I am going to whip through this stuff pretty quickly, guys, but as I've said before, this is stuff that you will not get an exam question asking you about the history of Glasgow specifically, but it is useful to help set the scene for what some of the other questions will want you to discuss. So, Glasgow, right, when it was founded, was founded in a ford in the River Clyde. It's why it had its original location. It was originally used fishing, farming, and a river crossing. It developed as a religious centre with the cathedral being built, and it then developed as an educational centre with the Glasgow University following this. As we move into the 18th century, Glasgow was ideally located to be a major trading hub. It had serviceable ports, and it was on the west side of the United Kingdom, so it was in an ideal location to use as a port to travel to the New World, particularly when you consider that this is a point in history where the slave trade is still very, very much alive. Glasgow was fairly prominent in the trade of people and other goods. As we move into the 19th century, we start to see the Industrial Revolution take hold, and we start to see Glasgow's population explode. You can see the little figures that I've got here. That over a 100-year period, you see a 700,000 people increase in Glasgow's population. Now, this is where stuff starts to become extremely pertinent for our case study. Why are we seeing this population explosion? We're seeing it because we've got a huge growth in heavy industry. We're seeing shipbuilding in particular for Glasgow really take off, and that's attracting people to the area, these available jobs. Other things that are attracting people to the area, you've got the Highland clearances that are occurring. So people are being moved from the Highlands in Scotland and from Ireland, and they are coming into Glasgow because there's a place to work and a place to live. Worth noting, the people from Ireland are coming not as a consequence of the Highland clearances, but as a consequence of the Irish potato famine, which is occurring at this point in history as well. Now, as this happens, this is where we start to see Glasgow rise to being very much in its heyday, where it's an extremely important city and it has a lot of economic power. However, all good things must come to an end. And as we reached Glasgow's kind of height, where it's really at its kind of maximum boom, we've got a population of 1.1 million people. A vast majority of these people are working in heavy industry. However, as we start to hit the 30s, as we start to hit the 1910s and 1920s, Glasgow starts to decline. And it declines with the decline of heavy industry. Now, as we see, particularly post-World War II, when heavy industry really goes into decline in Glasgow, we start to see people leave the city who can, and for those who can't, we see the areas where they used to live, for those who worked in heavy industry, fall into rapid decline. And as so the last little stat I've got here, over the course of the 90 years between 1990 and 1991, we're seeing a decrease in the population of, around about 500,000, and that's extremely significant. As we go into the 21st century, Glasgow does start to rebound. We have been making steps to try and revitalise Glasgow as a city. This has helped to address the falling population to an extent. It's still nowhere near the numbers that it was during its heyday, but we are starting to see higher quality houses being built, and we are improving the overall conditions in Glasgow. Now, what I'm going to do, guys, I'm going to stop this video here, and I'm going to put this up as 2 parts. So in the next video, we're going to go into really more in-depth stuff that's going to look at urban change in Glasgow, as the slide suggests. And it's going to mean that with the next video, it will be very much focused on the stuff that can appear in the exam. So this video, I say, we'll wrap it up here, and it has been, really much focusing on the background to our case study in Glasgow, and it's the kind of stuff that will help you demonstrate depth of knowledge in your questions by showing the background that's led to the changes that we're going to talk about in the next video. And until then, I'll see you guys later. Bye.